Good evening. It's 7:02. This is the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for Thursday, December 5th. I'll call the meeting to order. First on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next is, we need to appoint Hugh Cushion as a full member for tonight's meeting.
I make a motion that we appoint you a full member.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is roll call.
Hugh Cushing. Wes Pettit.
William LePage.
George Slingo.
John Glenn.
Okay. Next is, there's a public hearing for Tim Green, new singular wireless PCS. My understanding is they're postponing it.
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know, we don't have no action that needs to be done on that at this point. The next is a public hearing, remand hearing, order for Cine versus Slingo versus the Zoning Board of Appeals. Applicant is seeking a special permit to house emotional support chickens registered with the U.S. Service Animals on the property located at 63 Eagle Drive, Dudley, Mass. 01571, pursuant to zoning bylaw section 2.03.02, use by district chart livestock raising on parcel less than 5 acres, which requires a footnote number 2 that stable or enclosures for the animal are not greater than 50 feet from side or rear lot lines and 50 feet from any front line.
Good evening, I'm Andrew Bartholomew. I'm an attorney appearing on behalf of Deborah and Christopher Cine, 63 Eagle Drive, Dudley.
Okay, can you pull that a little closer?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
What was your name again, sir, please?
My name is Andrew Bartholomew. I'm an attorney appearing on behalf of Deborah and Christopher Cine of 63 Eagle Drive. And the Cines have submitted a application for a special permit under the zoning bylaws to accommodate 9 chickens on their property, which is under 5 acres.
Okay. No, just chickens, no rooster.
There's 1 rooster, so 9 chickens in total, including 1 rooster.
My understanding is that there wasn't going to be a rooster.
I believe there was a preliminary agreement that there would be no rooster, but my clients are pretty adamant that the rooster be accommodated as well, and they're willing to make whatever steps are necessary to make sure the rooster can stay. If that includes housing the rooster within the garage and only letting it out at certain times, they're willing to do that. But this rooster is an emotional support animal. It's approved for Ms. Cine's disabilities, and she would be willing to make whatever steps are necessary to keep it on the property.
Any questions from the board members?
Yeah, I guess I have a question. You just said that the chickens are emotional support animals.
Correct.
This application says they're a U.S. service animal. Are you going to pursue that at all or explain that, or is that what you're requesting is approval for a U.S. service animal as a chicken?
My understanding is that they are the same thing. They are approved to treat her disability. She has a doctor approve those animals to treat her disability.
That's the answer to my question, I guess.
What doctor?
Well, I don't agree with it, but that's the answer to the question. Fine.
Do you know the doctor's name?
I don't have it in front of me. No, I do not know it off the top of my head.
Mr. Cine?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. So it's your understanding that there was no talk about reneging on the rooster or doing away with the rooster?
My understanding was that there was a previous agreement that there would be no rooster.
Okay, what happened to that agreement, if I may?
I don't know if anything happened to it. My client is attached to this rooster, this particular rooster, and she has documentation saying that she needs the treater disability, and she is willing to do whatever it takes to keep it.
So you could understand why there'd be a little bit of hesitation from the board, at least from me. Basically, from what I understood, that there was a deal done, if maybe that's the wrong word to use, but there was compensation done. A deal maybe have struck in with no rooster. And now you come before us, and now there is a rooster. So there's some hesitation on our part. I shouldn't speak for the board. There's some hesitation on my part, because it's like the last minute. It's like, wait a minute here. That's not what we heard.
Sure, and I understand
then-
what you're saying. If that
so-
calls for further negotiation, we're certainly willing to have those conversations.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. So, I don't know how much you're looking for from the board or from me as the board member. I'm not quite prepared to do anything at this point. Thank you.
Sure.
Town council?
Do you have a particular question for me, or you
Can
just?
you pull this closer?
Oh, sorry. But I don't think there's any disagreement that we proceeded ahead with the remand on the understanding that the SUNYs were willing to get rid of the rooster. And I learned today that they were not willing to get rid of the rooster.
May I ask a question? When did you know?
That they were not going to get rid of the rooster?
Correct.
I learned this afternoon.
Okay, so that's the first that you've heard of it.
Yes, as we previously discussed, the board was willing to move forward with a remand to reconsider this application, but had concerns about the rooster. And my understanding was that the seniors were amenable to moving forward with the chickens, but not the rooster until today.
Right.
I might want to suggest, and it's totally your discretion how you want to proceed, that perhaps you, discuss the chicken component of this separate from the rooster component of it, because those may have different impacts in the mind of the board on the neighborhood, and it's possible that the board will ultimately proceed ahead with a decision where you say, well, we're fine with a special permit for chickens, but not the rooster, or we're fine for everything, or we're fine for nothing. But I may suggest that, that your discussions, your deliberations, and to the extent that anyone wants to speak on the issue, that keep in mind that the impacts on a special permit may be different from a rooster versus a chicken. I don't know if council has anything specific additional to add about the proposal. I know there was a question previously about the 50-foot setback and whether the coop is meeting that standard.
My understanding is that it is 50 feet back from all lot lines.
I think you all were going to bring a plan showing that.
I was not told the plan beforehand, but we're certainly willing to do those measurements.
We have
and
seen it.
present- Okay.
Okay.
I have records, pictures of the coop, and it's well within the boundaries.
Okay.
So the setbacks, it does not meet the setbacks.
It does.
It
I
meets it.
thought it did.
Do you have the pictures?
Yeah.
I have further pictures if the board would like to see them.
Mr. Chairman, at 50 feet from the sides and the back. And I'm not sure. I mean,
These will help anybody.
Okay, please bring it.
Well, besides photos, do you not have a plot plan with measurements?
I do not have a plot plan with me. That's something we can certainly obtain and bring it and provide it to the board.
It's just kind of hard to determine from a photo.
It is. And I'll note that those fences are not on the lot lines. Those are further in from the lot lines as well. Those are taken this morning.
They may have the, had that photo with, where you could, it was all drawn out.
I have another question for, is it Mr. Bartholomew? Do I have that right?
Bartholomew, yep, correct.
Have you researched that we've had 2 other hearings about chickens since this first hearing for your client?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Are you aware that roosters were declined for approval, and in one case, they had to actually remove their rooster?
I'm aware of that as well.
Okay, good, thank you.
And I have a map here of the plot. It doesn't exactly show where the coop is, but it might be of some assistance.
Might help.
If you want to.
Sure.
Thank you.
Through the chair to Nelson, you don't recall what the measurement was from the...
Normally, in the other 2 cases, I was directed by the chairman to go and actually physically measure it. This one, no one ever directed me to do anything as far as the measurement, so I have no idea.
As I recall, you were restricted by the owner on
Well, it
entering our
wasn't-
property.
There was a different property. That wasn't that one.
Oh, okay.
Would you mind showing me that platform?
Mr. Chair, my suggestion was, I think the council should have brought the paperwork with the plot plan with the sizes. I mean, it's pretty clear in the bylaw, and they should be reading the bylaw, I think.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Through you. Are you looking for a decision from this board tonight with the timelines that are in place, if there are any? Are you looking for a decision tonight?
Not necessarily. I understand the board has to take things into consideration,
Right.
if necessary.
Is there a timeframe?
I don't have any particular time frame in mind.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions? As far as, I forgot your name, I'm sorry.
Robin.
Robin?
Robin.
Yep.
The question I have is, they were asking, they said they have a doctor's note or a we asked to see proof of that.
So the burden is certainly on the applicant to prove that they qualify under the law. They have a disability and that they require reasonable accommodation. That's something that you would weigh if you got into the fair housing part of this. So for example, if you're just evaluating the chickens themselves, and you're inclined to grant a special permit for the chickens in the normal course, you wouldn't necessarily get to the fair housing accommodation part of it. That might or may not come into play with, say, the rooster, if the, if your feelings on that are different, but we wouldn't necessarily need to get to that second step of the analysis unless you were inclined to decline what they were looking for. And then we would have to look at whether or not there's an additional basis to grant the permit beyond the normal special permit analysis.
Okay. At
Does that
this
help?
point, I'm speaking for myself, I'm not speaking for the whole board. I don't have a problem with the chickens. If they, me personally, I'd vote to have them, let them have the chickens. But the rooster, no, I want to be consistent. I've been consistent, I think I've been consistent right along, that there was no rooster. But I'm only one board member.
Well, I'd say that I would also agree with what George just said, except I'd want, if we had to do it tonight, I'd want to say that so long as the chicken coop itself was within the 50 feet boundaries, then I would be agreeable to the chickens, the hens, but not a rooster. In all fairness to other people in the town of Dudley and the abutters.
I'll second that. I'll go along with that.
If it's helpful, I do have a certificate of registration for 3 of the chickens and the rooster as well for service animal registration.
Could I see that?
Sure.
Thank you. I guess it doesn't matter for this evening, but I'd still like to take a look at it.
Did you say for 3 chickens?
Yeah.
So how many chickens they have now?
9 chickens, including the rooster, and they're all registered as service animals currently. So this is a little outdated.
Seeking U.S. service animals? Is that a copy for us to keep, or is that,
Yes.
thank you.
Do you have any documentation that defines a U.S. service animal versus a emotional support animal?
Did not have that
Because I
with
think
me.
there's a difference.
Okay. I
I'm
do
not
have-
sure, but I believe there's a difference.
There are differences in certain situations, but I will say for purposes of the Fair Housing Act, you can have an emotional support animal can be a reasonable accommodation. So I don't think for purposes of this hearing that there's a distinction between the two for the Fair Housing Act component. In the public accommodation setting, there are different standards, but for these purposes, I don't think there's a distinction. You would be looking at weighing the need for the accommodation, the benefits of the accommodation to the burden of the accommodation, generally. But it's not a distinction, in my opinion, for Fair Housing Act purposes. Not to complicate things, but I think there were a couple other components of the application that maybe were in need of discussion. There was an issue before the strobe light, and to the extent the board's going to vote, I just want to make sure that the vote is clear on what is and is not allowed. I don't know if there were other concerns. There was previously a concern about I think it was a predator deterrent light, some kind of flashing light.
A predator light.
Yep.
That's what they were calling
And I
it.
don't know if they're still requesting to maintain that or not. I don't know if any of that has changed from the first application, so maybe you guys could speak to that, but.
Is there an objection to the predator light? Is that
There was.
Yes. Then one of the neighbors was complaining that the light was going in their window.
Right.
Our suggestion was to reverse the light and have it go into their own window.
I believe, based on the pictures I've seen, that it has been relocated. It's no longer on the side that it was, but I can confirm that and follow up with the board. If that is a condition.
Mr. Chairman, because, your board, our provisions for your board say, you make conditions. Are you, as their attorney, authorized to make decisions tonight? Because, to me, they should almost be here, because, everything's changing in the conditions. How do you make conditions if you don't have two sides that can decide on anything? So are you authorized to make conditions with the board, or
If there are-
not,
If there are certain conditions that are required before approval of the permit, then I will most likely have to run those by my client. But there are certain conditions we've already discussed that I am authorized to approve.
Mr. Chairman, through you. The second half of that question, is there a reason why they are not here tonight? I mean, it's a very important issue. They were very emotional the last couple of times they did show up, and
Sure.
you would tend to think, after what we saw, that they in fact would be here.
Sure, and I'm sure, as everybody knows, there has been a dispute here before, and I'm here on behalf of my clients to hopefully resolve that dispute. That's the only reason.
Okay, so to back it up a little bit, if we were to come to an agreement with you and then you take that agreement back to them and they say no, then again, no deal.
That's my understanding. If the board makes approval of the permits conditioned on some kind of agreement, then I will have to approve that with my client. I don't have the authority to make any kind of condition, any kind of
So you do
agreements
not
on their
have the
behalf.
authority to make any type of decision.
It depends on what the condition is.
Example?
If the board were to say that the rooster could remain on the property as long as it were kept in the garage, I am authorized to make that agreement.
As a follow-up, this registration, the certificate that's before me, was there a letter attached when it was sent by whomever, the U.S.? I can't read it. I don't have it.
I've not seen the letter. I believe it would have been, but I have not seen it.
I'm sorry?
I have not seen any letter that was.
So you don't know if
authorized.
there was a letter attached? I'm just looking for a letter.
I don't know
It
that,
has
no.
a date on it, it looks valid, I'm just looking for further verification.
My understanding is there are updated documents, and I can get those.
I'm sorry?
I can get updated documents.
Yeah, I'd like to
Those are-
see some
sure.
updated documents. This is, well, as I see it, it's over a year old. So,
It is. And there are more chickens that have been approved since then.
okay. But I would just like, you know, to cover our basis in order to be fair. As one of the previous speakers said, we'd like to be fair to the entire town of Dudley.
Is that with respect to the rooster or to the other chickens as well?
I'm sorry?
Is that solely with respect to the rooster or with respect to the other chickens as well, the other
I
8
would
chickens?
say both.
Have the other citizens in the state that have had permits approved also had emotional support chickens? My understanding is it's not a requirement.
I'd have to do some research and look at my notes. I don't have my notes
Okay.
tonight.
In regards to that certification, it actually doesn't say anything, it doesn't say it's by any government agency, and it doesn't have a signature, and it is just a certificate. So I can't look at that and see that as evidence for any decision I make tonight. It would seem to me it would behoove somebody, an applicant, to actually bring all of the ammunition that they could, and that's absent tonight. I don't even feel very secure in saying that I would approve it so long as the chicken coop is 50 feet from the setbacks. I'd rather have an engineered design that people could sign their name to in agreement that it'll be 50 feet. We don't have that. But, I mean, I would say yes to a motion if it included approval of a certain number of hens, no rooster, and so long as they stay compliant with the setbacks. And, of course, still have to discuss that strobe light issue, I guess.
Mr. Chairman, is there any feel from the board to maybe continue this meeting?
I would like to ask the members of the board if we can continue this public hearing so that we could talk to town council.
If I may inquire of Mr. Cushing, you said earlier that the coop was in fact 50 feet back from the sideline?
From photos that we were shown, yes.
Okay. I'd ask the board to consider that as well.
We have,
Gloria, do you remember what happened to those photos?
They're in the file.
They're in the file?
No, they're in the other file. Is the door locked?
so, close the public hearing.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, this form is certified, I guess. Is it certified? It's a certificate. I work for a state government agency, and what we're used to is saying a stamp. Birth certificates, death certificates, certificates of any type of registration. I don't see a seal on this.
Okay.
And we also would like to, or I'd like to see a updated date on it. It has September of 2018. And if and when they send it, I should say, I'm sure they would have an attached letter. I don't think if any business, whether it be state government, local government, federal government, or
Sure.
private sector would send out something without a certificate. And I'm not looking to be difficult. I'm looking
I understand.
I'm looking to be, if someone comes to us, and I'd like to see a seal. At least we can say, hey, you know what, here it is. It's the real deal, it's sealed, it's signed, it's a go.
I understand, and again, is that with respect to the roosters or the chickens? Because I believe under the bylaws, there's no requirement that the animals have to be emotional support chickens to be on the property.
Okay, I think what you have here, what I keep hearing on the board is that I don't think the problem is with the chickens, sir. I think the problem is with the rooster. And, you know, as I think Mr. Chairman spoke, and stated that we want to be consistent, because we're being looked at. And we don't want to go off base and say, oh, you did it for Mrs. Sinney, but you didn't do it for Mr. Jones. Why? We want to know why. I don't want to get caught in that.
So if I understand what you're saying, you've approved permits for other citizens in the town on the basis that they have chickens but no rooster, so you'd like to see a certificate for the rooster alone. Is that correct?
I would like to see that, sure.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, and I don't want to overstep it, it's not just the certificate, that if your client wants to make a case for an accommodation under the FHA as it relates to the rooster, she needs to make that case to the board. And I think the board is saying they have no problem with the chickens under the bylaw as it is, but that the rooster they're inclined to not allow, as they have in the past. And so if the board is going to, for example, issue a special permit that chickens are allowed but a rooster is not allowed, then if your client wants to make a claim that that rooster is an accommodation, she needs to make that claim so the board can evaluate it. And I don't want to misspeak, but I was just trying to summarize what I think I'm hearing.
And did we request, Mr. Chairman, through you, did we request, or to you, did we request a medical update? Are we allowed to see that, to see if, in fact, that a doctor has signed off on the fact that these...
Well, that's if we approve, if they go to that step of, with the emotional support.
Okay.
We're not there yet.
Okay.
Correct.
Well, again, if the applicant wants to make the case, then we can work with the applicant to accommodate her having the opportunity to do that through an executive session, you know, in a way that is respectful of her privacy. But that's a case that she needs to make to the board in order for you to be able to make a decision, you know, and weigh whatever she puts before the board as far as the basis for the accommodation, the need for the rooster against the detriment of the rooster, and be able to do the analysis under the Fair Housing Act, if that's how she wants to proceed.
Okay,
And
Mr. Pettit, you looked at the additional
bless you.
pictures. Are you satisfied with the setbacks?
Well,
Or you still want to
it doesn't
see-
show a measurement, it looks good. I mean, I guess we could just put in writing that they agree that the chicken coop will meet the setbacks, and if it doesn't, they could just move it perhaps to meet the setbacks. It does look like their lot is large enough to meet the setbacks, but, you know, just nobody's gone through the trouble to do any measurements and actually show that to us.
I agree with that, because we want to be on point we want all ducks in order in case someone appeals or doesn't like it. At least we can come back and say, hey, this is the documentation that we have. This is, you know, what we requested. They complied, and it's a go. We want consistency on the board, I believe, is what I'm hearing. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Anybody from the public? So, is the board in favor of closing the public hearing? or-
I make a motion, we
Well,
close.
just before we get to that, if I may, I mean, if we're gonna entertain additional information, from the applicant. I don't know where the board is. If you're gonna vote tonight, I think it makes sense to close the public hearing. If you're not gonna vote tonight, if there's gonna be a continuance, then you probably wanna keep the public hearing open so that you're able to receive additional information from the applicant.
Okay.
But that's the board's decision. I just wanna point out the distinction.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if the applicant, if you wanna comment on that, or,
I'd request that it be continued so we can supply the necessary information, but I'd also request that we clarify exactly what's being requested. So we want the certified official document showing the emotional support status of all these animals, including the rooster. Is that correct?
if I may, I don't think it's necessary that the board needs to dictate to you what you need to bring. I think if your client wants to make a claim under the Fair Housing Act, then what the board's saying is you need to make that claim. How you make the claim for both the benefit under the Fair Housing Act of having a disability and the need for the reasonable accommodation and how that's being accommodated, that's, I think, on you folks. But if you want the board to consider that as part of their analysis, then they need to receive that information.
Sure. From a legal standpoint, she has a disability. She has been qualified with a disability to have emotional support animals.
With all due respect, though, you're saying that board has to make that finding, and there's nothing before them.
Right. So
to make that finding.
I want to get on the record exactly what it will take for the board to approve that finding, just so there's no gray area.
I think it's up to you to
You have to
bring
prove your
the
case.
information, we take a look at it.
Sure.
Because I can't say, I need to see this, or this, as, I don't know if,
I need, for me, I'm only one board member, I like to see proof that predator lights are shining towards their house, and then not shining out away. And I would like to see a plot plan showing the chicken coop and measurements. Mr. Cini?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to follow up, we've already heard this. I'd like to see, I would like to see, along with the board, an updated version of the certificate. And hopefully, there'll be some type of stamp on it, sealed, and any letter that is attached to the certificate. So we can be up to date and on point. Questions?
Oh, I understand.
I'd like to actually make a suggestion. Since the term U.S. service animal is actually reserved to just certain specific animals, in 26 states, it's actually a crime to portray an emotional support animal or any other animal as a service animal when it isn't such. It's just something you may want to research and discuss.
Thank you.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to make it clear tonight that originally, when you came here, we thought it was going to be about the chickens. I don't think there's an argument, because we've did great deal of research as far as our bylaws, and we understand that with a special permit, it's a permitted use with the chickens, with conditions, and the conditions, it's in our bylaws that they're allowed to issue the conditions, and now everything's changed. I guess my question would be, you keep talking about service animals. I've never denied service animals. Should we even be talking about that? I think now the service animals, the proof should really come to me, being zoning officer, and then if I decide, then you can appeal my decision. I don't think it's their decision personally, but maybe I'm wrong, and town council's here, so correct me if I'm wrong.
They've applied for a special permit to be able to maintain chickens on the property.
Right.
One of the chickens they want to keep is a rooster, so I think it falls within their application for the special permit, for the board to make that decision, and the way that I see it is that, again, and I've already said, to the extent the board is inclined to grant the special permit under the bylaw, we never get to the FHA conversation, we never get to the support animal conversation. To the extent there's a component of the application that the board is inclined not to grant, for example, the roosters, then the applicant can have an opportunity to say to the board, this is why, although you might not ordinarily allow roosters under the FHA, I have a disability or condition, and this is the accommodation that I think will aid it, it's the rooster, and this is why, and then the board is able to make a decision and weigh the balance of the law against that. So I do think it's appropriately within the application before them.
I guess my other question is, and I think this is what they're having a problem with, or this is what I'm seeing tonight. They're not lawyers or anything else to know if it's legit, whatever they're showing them as far as being, service animals or whatever. So, I mean,
That's why we have town council.
yeah.
I mean, partly that's why you've made, but I mean, that's the same in any case. I mean, you receive information at this board and you evaluate it all the time, and if folks are happy with your decision, it ends there. If they don't like it, then it ends up in court and a judge looks at it. But, again, I do think that the applicant has a burden to meet, and it's for the board to evaluate whether that burden has been met or not. But you receive information from applicants all the time on all sorts of issues. Yes.
Mr. Sini?
I'm
I
sorry,
thought you
you
were-
done? No,
Sorry.
this wasn't directed. Are you finished? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm finished, yeah. I thought you were asking me another question.
Through you, I believe the building inspector kind of alluded to, and I do agree with him, that the applicant next time maybe should be present, because I didn't like what I heard from you. You have the authority, but you don't have the authority. That's what I got. That's the messaging that I got from you. On certain criteria, you have the authority, and in other situations, in a different criteria, you may not. And, we understand, as a board, that it was difficult the last time, but, I would just like to see the person present, if it's that important to them. I know those things that come up in life are that important to me. Be reassured that I would be there, whether it be, in a court of law or what have you. And this is not a court of law, but if something is that important to me, I'd make my presence known, at least by being here. Thank you.
Okay, the applicant has asked for a continuance so that he can get the rest of the paperwork that we requested. Does somebody want to make a
I make a
motion?
motion that we continue the public hearing
Second.
Until when?
until our next meeting.
We just to continue the notice part, we just need to continue to a time, date, place certain.
Yeah, what's our next meeting?
Thursday,
January.
January.
No. January 2nd.
January
Is that
2nd.
the Thursday?
Hold
No,
on.
wait a minute.
Hold on,
Oh.
January 1st is a Wednesday,
hold on, I'll get you in a minute. January 2nd is on a Thursday.
January 2nd. Do you want to meet the day after New Year's?
What kind of condition are you gonna be in, Mr. Chair?
That works for me.
January 2nd.
Sure. Thursday, we'll be back.
Does that work for you?
It does.
You guys, okay, great.
So 7 o'clock here?
7 o'clock here.
Thank you.
Should we take a vote on the continuance?
Oh, all those in favor, you gotta,
All those in favor?
Aye.
gotta go back and
I didn't hear it, so sorry.
Both continue the public hearing.
until,
It's been-
This, if you want to add it.
Made in
He
second.
made the motion, he seconded it. All those in favor? Continue the
Aye.
public.
Thank you.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you all.
So I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion. You don't have, yeah, make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 20 minutes of 8.